You ever drive past a giant new wind farm and just wonder, how did they build that without messing with the local wildlife? Or you see a massive new bridge going up and think, what about the river down below? It is a huge question, right? How do we build for the future without totally wrecking the present? Well, the answer lies in this really powerful strategic blueprint we're about to break down.
And that really is the fundamental challenge we're all facing. It's this constant tension between progress and preservation. To navigate that, you need a plan, a way to, predict the future before a single shovel ever hits the ground. And that plan, it's called the Environmental Impact Assessment, or EIA for short.
So, what exactly is an EIA? At its heart, it's a predictive tool. Think of it like a crystal ball, but one that's based on hard science and really rigorous methods. It's this mandatory process where developers have to systematically look ahead and answer one critical question. What are all the environmental consequences of this project, both the good and the bad?
And believe me, the scope of that question is immense. We are not just talking about a little bit of dust here. A major project can affect air quality, it can disrupt water tables, contaminate soil, displace entire habitats, and have some pretty profound social and economic effects on local communities. And EIA has to account for all of it.
Okay, so to tackle something that complex, you obviously need a solid foundation. The entire EIA process is actually built on a few core principles that guide every single decision. They turn what could be just a regulatory chore into a real roadmap for sustainability.
The whole thing really rests on three key pillars. First up, you've got precaution, this idea of anticipating risks and acting before they become problems. Second is transparency, which just means making sure all the data and plans are open for everyone to see. And third, and this is a big one, is participation, actively getting local communities involved right from the very beginning. Put them together and you get a process that's proactive, open, and fair.
And listen, these principles aren't just, nice suggestions. The EIA is anchored in a rock-solid legal framework. It starts way up high with directives, like in the EU, which then get baked into national laws. And that all trickles down to a binding requirement for developers. Bottom line, you can't build without one.
So we get the why. Now let's get into the how. An EIA isn't just some single report you hand in and you're done. No, it's a dynamic, phased life cycle. A whole journey that goes from that initial prediction all the way through to long-term auditing. And this journey has 6 key phases. It all kicks off with screening, which is basically to see if an EIA is even needed. Then comes scoping to figure out its boundaries. After that, experts gather baseline data to get a snapshot of the current environment. The real heavy lifting happens in assessment and mitigation, followed by crucial public participation to build consensus. And finally, ongoing monitoring makes sure the project stays on track for the long haul.
Let's just zoom in on those first 2 steps for a second, because they are absolutely critical. Screening asks a really simple yes or no question. Is an EIA legally required for this project? It's a quick, low-cost filter. Scoping, on the other hand, asks, okay, since it's a yes, what exactly does the EIA need to cover? This is where you focus your time and money on the most important issues. You don't end up with some bloated, useless study. And getting this part right from the start, is a total game changer. It's why you'll hear experts say that doing early and accurate screening and scoping isn't just some bureaucratic step, it is the single best thing you can do to save a project time and, you guessed it, money down the line. All right, so once you know you need an EIA and you've figured out its scope, it's time to gather data. I mean, it's common sense, right? You can't possibly predict the future impact of a project if you don't have a crystal clear picture of how the environment looks today. This all starts with mapping everything on the surface. Where are the houses and neighborhoods? What are the existing pollution levels from nearby industries? How could things like farm runoff or just losing open space affect the area? You're basically creating this super comprehensive map of how the land is used and where all the sensitive spots are. But of course, what we see on the surface is only half the story. The analysis has to go deeper. Literally. Subsurface profiling maps out all the geological layers, the soil, the bedrock, and those all-important aquifers. This is how you spot hidden risks like fault lines and, crucially, understand how groundwater flows, which is vital if you want to predict how contamination might travel. Okay, so you've got mountains of data. Now what? Well, this is where the EIA shifts gears. It goes from being a diagnostic tool to a problem-solving one. The goal now is to use all that data to pinpoint every potential risk, and then engineer a solution for it. And the framework they use for this is actually elegantly simple. It's called the Source Pathway Receptor Model. First, you identify the source of a potential hazard. Then, you figure out the pathway it could travel through, like the air, water, or soil. And finally, you identify the receptor. The people, the ecosystems, or resources that could be harmed. A risk only actually exists if that entire chain is complete. So here's how that simple model gets put into practice. You take that idea and blow it up into a detailed diagnostic matrix like this one. It meticulously traces every potential contaminant source, say contaminated soil on the surface, through every possible pathway, like people breathing it in or it's seeping into the groundwater, to every single vulnerable receptor, from construction workers to entire ecosystems. Let's make this real with an example. In Spain, a huge wind farm project had to figure out how to get clean energy without harming local birds. So, by using the EIA process, the early scoping phase identified major migratory bird paths. This let them reposition the turbines and work with the public on temporary shutdown schedules. The result? Minimal disruption to the bird's habitat and, get this, zero lawsuits from the community. A perfect win-win. So, once all those risks are mapped out and understood, the focus shifts to planning the fix, the remediation. This is the engineering phase. The main goal here is to design real, concrete solutions to bring those risks down to acceptable levels, always making sure to protect the most vulnerable people and places first. But the work doesn't just stop when construction starts. Oh no. The EIA becomes a living guide for active, on-the-ground management. This means things like dust suppression systems running on construction sites or advanced water filtration for industrial holding tanks. The plan doesn't just sit on a shelf, it's put to work every single day. And finally, all of this incredible work, the surveys, the risk charts, the engineering plans, it all gets consolidated into one unified, defensible package for the regulators to approve. But, crucially, it also sets up that ongoing monitoring framework to make sure the project stays compliant and safe throughout its entire life. All right, so we've walked through the entire process, from the core principles to the nuts and bolts of how it's done. So let's just pull it all together and look at the big picture, what an EIA really is when it's done right. This Venn diagram really says it all. When you combine that meticulous early baseline data with genuine public participation and then back it all up with continuous monitoring, you get something incredibly powerful right there in the middle: sustainable operation. The EIA stops being a hoop to jump through and becomes a strategic engine that actively reduces risk.
And that's the bottom line. A well-executed EIA isn't just a document you file away and forget about. It's an investment. It's a shield against future liabilities and regulatory headaches for sure. But more than that, it's a powerful tool that enables truly sustainable development.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. We've seen how this blueprint works today. But as our construction projects get even more ambitious, and as our climate becomes more and more unpredictable, how is this essential tool, this blueprint for balancing progress and preservation, going to have to adapt for the future?